Thank you so much. So, I was on this little thing called American Idol last year. It was pretty crazy. God was very, very good, and it's been a very, very strange year for me because I came into American Idol having been a worship leader for the last 7 or 8 years, but as a artist, I had kind of moved over doing mainstream music, and I pretty much assumed that that's where God was going to take me as far as being an artist. I really felt like God was calling me to do something more similar to like a Switchfoot or Reliant K or some bands where it's Christians that are doing stuff in the mainstream. And as I really started to pray about what God would have me to do, I had this weird feeling like God wanted me to make a record for the church, and I thought God was probably mistaken on that one. And so I prayed some more and started meeting with labels, and it was really weird. I came in 10th place, and within a few weeks, actually like a week of being voted off the show, I had been contacted by 11 labels to discuss recording and possibly doing a recording contract and that kind of thing. And there was one major label on the mainstream side in particular. Our very first meeting that we sat down to talk, he goes, "So I heard you're a Christian." I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "So how Christian are you?" I was like, "Well, I still sin almost every day. So maybe like a 7, scale of 10. Like I'm good, but I'm not really that good, kind of thing." And I didn't really know how to answer that question. And as we discussed, kind of what they were interested in, they really were not interested in me dealing with my faith at all. And I think of myself way more as a songwriter, and I wrote all the songs on the album that just came out a few weeks ago. And as I was writing, thank you. I think of myself more as a songwriter, and I was going, man, as a songwriter, I want to be able to talk about life, and I want to be able to talk about my whole life. And I feel like to not be able to talk about my faith, which is, the biggest part of my life, I think would just be cutting off such a huge part of who I am. And then he said, I think we'd be able to offer you a $250,000 advance. And I went, oh man, it might be worth it to lop off part of my life. And because that's a lot of money to walk away from. And so I think my Christian meter went down to about a 6 at that point. And the more I prayed about it, all joking aside, the more I prayed about the more I really felt like that I was coming to the place where I felt like, for some weird reason, and I still don't understand it completely, God was taking me in this huge thing that was American Idol and bringing me back around to the church. And as I made that decision, it was a tough decision. The email that I wrote to that record guy that offered me $250,000, I let it sit in. I have Gmail. How many of you guys, do you guys know what Gmail is? Gmail is like the best email, I think. And over to the side, every time I'd open up my email, I had a draft of this email that I'd written this guy basically saying, I don't know how to explain it except for it's between me and my God, that I just feel like I'm supposed to make a record that deals with my faith. And it sat in my outbox for about 3.5 weeks because I was like, man, that's a lot of money to walk away from. And so I finally sent the letter, and as I started to really sit down and write for this record, I wanted to write about that experience of being on American Idol. It's this huge, massive thing that even I didn't know. I hadn't really watched a show before I went on American Idol, and I had no idea how big it was. And coming from that, and in my season, I was an early favorite. And coming from that spotlight, going out, literally Blake Lewis and I were roommates during the semifinals, and we would go out almost every night to go out to eat. And I think we went 2.5 weeks straight of never having to pay for a meal because people would just be like, hey, we're going to pay for the American Idol kids over there. We like them. He looks like he needs to eat some more. So I was like, yes, I do. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I came from that, and I really wanted to write about the experience and coming to the place where I said, God, it doesn't matter if I want to rock out, in mainstream clubs and everything like that. all that matters to me is that I'm emptied of myself. And so we sat down, and I wrote this with a guy named Tony Wood, who's one of my favorite lyricists in the world. He's written some of my favorite songs, some of my favorite lyrics. We sat down, and he said, you know, what do you want to write about? And I'm like, man, I want to write about the experience of coming from American Idol and coming to the place of surrendering to the place where I can say I want to make a Christian record, because it's not a place that I thought that I would be at. And we sat down. The first thing we wrote was the lyric for the chorus, which says, "Empty me of me so I can be filled with you." And we went, okay, that's a good place to start. Let's write the rest of this lyric. And it ended up being a song that, as we wrote it, it ended up being one of those things where it just felt like one of those special songs, because it's my heart crying out to God to be emptied of myself. And no matter whether you're the president of the United States or a dog walker or some chubby guy that happened to be on American Idol, it's a prayer that everybody, every single one of us should be praying every day, to be emptied of ourselves so that we can be filled with Christ. Just enough of the spotlight when it burns bright to see how it gets in the blood. And I've tasted my share of the sweet life and the wild ride, and found a little is not quite enough. I know how I can stray, and how fast my heart could change. Empty me of the selfishness inside, every vain ambition, and the poison of my pride, and any foolish thing my heart holds to. Lord, empty me of me so I can be filled with you. I've seen just enough of the quick buys of the best lives to know how prodigals can be drawn